The extreme weather in this year's hurricane season is raising new concerns about the effects of climate change. The challenges for Boston, especially from rising sea levels, will be addressed in a presentation September 14th at the New England Aquarium. The event's being co-sponsored by the Massachusetts and Boston League of Women Voters, the Aquarium, and the School for the Environment at UMass Boston. To tell us about the event are the Mass League's environmental specialist and co-chair of the Environmental Steering Committee, Launa Zimmaro, and from UMass Boston, and Associate Professor of Hydrology, Dr. Ellen Marie Douglas. Thank you both very much for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
I want to start with Launa because you're not doing this because we just had a bad hurricane. This has been in the works for months.
That's right, since March, basically. The League, people don't always associate the League with an interest in environmental issues, but we've been covering and championing environmental issues since the 1920s when we started as an organization. So we've got a long history of involvement around environmental concerns and issues. And in any event, our state league developed a steering committee to just work on public information around climate change issues, and we've created a series of 4 forums, and Ellen's presentation at the aquarium next week is the second in our series. And really the purpose is to reach out to the public to inform them of issues that we think are directly will affect us moving forward.
What are we seeing now that maybe we didn't even see a year or two ago? As far as Boston and the effect of the rising sea levels?
Well, I don't know that, I mean, we're over time we're seeing more extreme events, a little more rainfall and more frequency of these extreme events is expected from a warming climate. Over time we're also seeing sea levels rise. So when we had the king tide last fall, a lot of people went around the city and took pictures because it was inundating areas that don't normally get wet and haven't gotten wet in the past. And so those kinds of things really bring to light the fact that sea levels rising, that things are changing. We're getting warmer. Oftentimes we get warmer summers or longer heat waves and more frequent heat waves. Those are the things we can expect, and we're starting to see them.
Right. Coming back to Launa, as far as the League being an advocate in this issue, because all these years we've heard about the League encouraging voter participation, but being neutral about it. But advocacy is not neutral. So why go in this new direction?
Well, advocacy is around issues, not candidates or parties, and we definitely advocate around issues that we think are important in terms of the public well-being and welfare. So environmental issues are a major concern, or should be a major concern for all of us, because all of us are impacted one way or another. So our advocacy is really based on two levels. We work on public education, and because the League believes very strongly that an informed public is it will be more engaged and involved in the democratic process, and that's really kind of vital to keeping our democracy strong and involved. So that is what we do, and it's some lobbying around specific pieces of legislation that are not tied to a party or a candidate, but that are consistent with League policy around environmental and energy issues.
Right. This is BNN News. We're talking with Launa Zimmaro from the Mass League of Women Voters and Professor Ellen Marie Douglas from UMass Boston. Professor, talk about I guess a plausible worst case for Boston. I mean, we're not going to maybe get hit with what they've been hit with down in the Gulf of Mexico, but given a certain track and a certain potency of a storm, what could the city look like if all that water started coming in?
Well, we've put out a number of maps looking at the combination of sea level rise and an extreme storm surge. So around here, an extreme storm surge is around 5 feet. And, we have a tide range of 10 feet, so, 5 feet above mean sea level. And so depending on when a storm comes through, it makes a big difference on the flooding that occurs. So for example, when Superstorm Sandy hit New York, it was right at high tide and at the astronomically high tide. When it hit here, it was near low tide. And so we saw a little bit of flooding, but not much. But had it been 6 hours later, we would have seen a lot more flooding. And so We don't typically get a Category 4 or 5 storm up here. They're usually one, Category 1 or the tropical storm by the time. They still dump a lot of rain. And so you get the combination of rain and that storm surge. Storm water drainage can't flow out to the ocean and the storm surge is coming in. So there'll be a lot of the areas of fill that get inundated and flooded because the water just doesn't have anywhere to go.
Now, fill sounds like dirt, but fill could also mean, well, the south end of Back Bay.
Yeah, right. So, areas that were once part of a salt marsh or a wetland area now are filled in and built on, and those are the areas that are most vulnerable in Boston.
Right. Coming back to Launa, what should people be doing when they hear things like, because a lot of us, they say, well, I haven't seen that in my lifetime too much. We've got lots of time. Is this something we really got to get going on right now?
Well, the League has developed this steering committee because we think it is urgent. And if you look at what is being reported from scientific community and other concerned individuals, it's clearly a matter that we have to address. We've been waiting for a very long time. We've been taking sort of incremental steps, but it is going to impact us again, maybe more directly or less directly over time, but eventually we're going to be feeling impacts that hit others as well. They will come back and impact us over time. And I think that it is a matter of urgency, and it is up to all of us to act and expect more in terms of what we're doing at this time around that issue.
Professor, if a 5-foot flood is something that is not all that unrealistic over a certain span of time, we're talking about parts of the city where there's already been some development. We're talking about places like Woodette Circle where they're talking about massive development. So does that mean you do nothing, or you have to do something differently?
Well, one would hope that you would do something differently, and you can build buildings that accommodate flooding. If you are in a flood zone or in a place that's vulnerable to flooding, you can build the first floor in a way that, when a storm is coming, you move everything up, and there's nothing important on that floor, no utilities and things like that, and then the water can come in and go out, and you can recover. So one would hope in all these areas that have been mapped as vulnerable to future sea level rise and storms that those things are being taken into consideration. I know the city of Boston requires new developers to consider climate change. They don't constrain them on what they do, but they at least say you must look at the available information and accommodate that in your design and your plans somehow.
Well, we should mention this event's going to be on the 14th at the Aquarium in the IMAX Theater?
Yes, the Simons IMAX Theater.
And at what time is it going to start?
7 o'clock.